Hello everyone, DSP here. Ladies, gentlemen, and everyone else out there, welcome to my annual year-end series for 2022. Every year, I count down the most disappointing games and the best games of each year in a formal series, and this is no different. Welcome to the most disappointing games of 2022 countdown. Now, that was delayed. Allow me to explain how my countdown works and why it's different from a lot of other countdowns out there, okay? I don't do a formal worst games of the year countdown. And there's a couple reasons why I don't do a formal worst games of the year countdown. First of all, I feel like that's kind of played out. And even since I'm a 15-year content creator, right, I think that it makes more sense to do something a little different than just say, oh, these are the absolute worst. In addition, being that I'm a full-time streamer, I have to make the best use of my time and money. And a lot of the times, if I hear or get wind that a game is going to be a stinker, I try to stay away from it, okay? So a lot of the games that may very well be the worst games of the year, I don't play. On purpose, I avoid them. So that way, you know, I'm not wasting our time here together on the streams. And so, what we're going to do today, instead of the worst games, is count down what I felt were the most disappointing games of the last year. So what does that mean? It basically means that in each of these entries that I'm about to call out is a game that I feel should have, would have, or could have had way more potential than was actually realized in the final product. In some cases, these games had insanely botched launches. In some cases, the game started out good and then fell flat on their faces, or in some cases, these were games that were follow-ups to existing franchises or IPs or a company that had a great track record, and for whatever reason, what they put out in 2022 was just very subpar to what everyone else was expecting. Now, because of the unique nature of this countdown, I'd like you all to understand something up front. Just because I've selected a game as one of the most disappointing games of the year does not mean it's a bad game. I know, a lot of people are shocked by this. Like, wait a minute, if you're saying it's one of the most disappointing, it's got to be one of the most terrible games. That's not necessarily the case. You could very well have a very good game that has one major flaw in it that makes it incredibly disappointing. And in fact, I'm here to tell you, a few of the games in my countdown are going to be just like this. Okay? What are your thoughts? Do you like this kind of countdown? Do you agree or disagree with my picks? Please let me know. Right now, we've got over 500 people on the live stream who are going to be interacting with me. But in addition, I'm sure many of you are going to be watching this on demand after the fact on DSPGaming on YouTube. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Did I miss anything? I probably did. Because like I said, I actively try to skip the games that I know are going to be stinkers. But that certainly doesn't make me avoid all the games that end up being disappointing. And that's what we're going to go through today. Okay? So, how many games? Well, we've got the unlucky 13 most disappointing games of the year that I'm going to go through, and we've got an honorable mention, and you're going to figure out why it's an honorable mention in just a second. So 13 games. However, please note, most of these are not necessarily ordered from like worst to best or best to worst. These are all games that particularly I personally found as a disappointment. Now, the final few, yes, to me were the most disappointing games of the year. But, you know, when I'm getting into the, you know, the high teens or, you know, 9, 8, 7, these games could all be interchanged in ranking. It's not like this one actually disappointed me more than another or anything like that until we get to the end of the countdown. Fair enough? All right. Hope that makes sense. Hope you guys are ready to sit back, relax, and enjoy my year-end series of 2022. Let's switch over. Ladies and gentlemen, my first entry, the honorable mention for most disappointing game of 2022, is not a game that was actually released in 2022. And that's why it's just an honorable mention. But let's talk a little bit about Halo Infinite. To understand why this is actually one of the most disappointing games of 2022, you have to understand the history of the game. Halo Infinite came out in the fall of 2021. It was a free game on Xbox Game Pass for the Series S and X. It was really good at a time when Battlefield and Call of Duty both had failed entries in their franchises in 2021. This game stood apart from those and actually reinvigorated the Halo franchise. At a time when a lot of people thought that Halo was being run into the ground and was dead, Infinite was a much needed reboot and an injection of hype, nostalgia, but also, quite frankly, great modern game development. It had a campaign with a great story and big changes to the formula of what Halo could be expected to be with an open world and lots of side content. But where Halo Infinite really shined at launch was the multiplayer, because when the multiplayer was released, man, it was very exciting to have that competitive nature back in Halo Infinite. We had not really played a competitive Halo game in many years, and a lot of people have been saying that 343 Industries, which is the company that took up the reins after Bungie sold the Halo franchise to Microsoft, wasn't doing a very good job of putting out new iterations of the franchise. Infinite changed all of that, and personally, I got addicted to the multiplayer of Halo Infinite, and I played it for several months, like November, December, even into January, February of this year, and that's why I actually wanted to mention it in this countdown. So you might say, wait a minute, it's not a 2022 game, so how could it possibly be one of the most disappointing games of 2022? Well, that's because of the unique nature of a game like Halo Infinite. Much like many other multiplayer games in this modern era, it's now a game that's considered games as a service. And because Halo Infinite came out in 2021, it was expected that there was going to be seasonal updates to the game, new maps added, new modes and tweaks added, content that was going to keep the game fresh and new. Literally, every multiplayer game out there does that, whether it's the competitive multiplayer of a game like Call of Duty Modern Warfare with its, updates to maps and also new content with Battle Royale. Other games as well, Apex Legends and Destiny does it. All these games that are first-person shooters have seasonal content that keep everyone hooked and engaged in playing. Well, Halo Infinite had that. They had a roadmap that they were promising to everyone was going to be their plan to continuously improve this game over 2022. But what ended up happening was probably the worst thing that could happen to a game like this. A game that, kind of out of nowhere, came back from obscurity, became mainstream prominent. Everyone was talking about Halo Infinite. And what ended up happening was the game became a victim of its own success. 343 Industries was, simply put, not equipped to handle a game of this magnitude. They basically just failed to fulfill their promises. They promised all this seasonal content that never happened. They kept pushing it back and delaying it. First, it was the co-op mode of the game, where you would be able to team up with someone else and actually play through the campaign in a cooperative manner, which had been a staple of the Halo franchise for a long time, just kept getting pushed back, pushed back, pushed back. New maps, new game modes, hell, even just tweaks or variations on existing parts of the game that people felt were overpowered or needed to be adjusted were massively delayed or never even came to fruition. While all other games around Halo Infinite were able to deliver on this kind of live update, games as a service formula, sadly, Halo Infinite was not. This game company, 343, just showed that they were kind of inept at being able to handle a game of this caliber. And for a flagship series that's supposed to be a killer app, a game that's supposed to sell Xbox consoles, you expect better. You expect far better than what Halo Infinite delivered in 2022. To give you guys some perspective, at the beginning of the year, I was playing Halo Infinite, and I got bored of it. I actually had done basically everything that I could. I was playing the ranked matches, and the ranked matches ended up being the laggiest ones. Why do I want to play ranked matches when every time I play, the latency is so bad I can barely hit anything? But then when I play a casualized match that's not ranked, everything's better. So once you've seen everything in the game, you've played these maps a million times, and they're not updating the game, you move on. By the time that they actively started updating it, which was well into the second half of 2022, the game had lost the vast majority of its player base. The hype was dead. And now, in 2023, does anyone even talk about Halo Infinite? What a sad state. A game that was number one in the first-person shooter landscape for many months is now a forgotten relic. People don't even talk about the game, even though it was such an exciting, positive reinvigoration, solely because of mismanagement of the game. That is sad, and that's definitely why I feel Halo Infinite is one of the most disappointing games of 2022, even though it wasn't even initially released in that year. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's now get to the formal games of my most disappointing games of 2022 countdown. Of course, this calls for a scene change. All right, we're going to get down to the most disappointing games. We got to get down into the bowels, all right? So let's start with a game that came out in early 2022 that for a lot of people was a little confusing and admittedly wasn't terrible, but at the same time, I felt didn't really live up to expectation and or what you were going to expect from this kind of a franchise. I present to you Pokemon Legends Arceus. Pay no attention to the man sitting below me. There's absolutely no way that I can block out my webcam from this gameplay in every situation, okay? Pokemon Legends Arceus is a very unique situation, okay? Pokemon, at this point, is a giant dynamo of a franchise, and it seems like no matter what Game Freak or the Pokemon Company releases, people are going to buy it up, and it's become a major seller, okay? Pokemon Legends Arceus was unique because for the first time ever, this was taking the Pokemon franchise into an open world, all right? That's cool. That's an interesting concept. Instead of being a top-down game where you're exploring almost like an RPG setting, now it's an open-world exploration. You're sneaking. You're trying to actively catch the Pokemon with the Pokeball as opposed to only doing turn-based fighting and catching them during the fights. There was a lot of unique things about Pokemon Legends Arceus, but there was a couple things going against it. First of all, the game came out only a few months after a Pokemon game just released in November 2021. Now, admittedly, the 2021 release was just a modern remake / rehash of a previous Pokemon game. But when you have Pokemon in November and Pokemon in January, that's a lot of Pokemon to stomach back to back, and a lot of consumers were confused as to which game they should be buying, how on earth they were going to be playing these games back to back without getting burnt out. In addition, Pokemon Legends Arceus, although it looks interesting as a game, really feels more like a test. Like, they were messing around and trying to see, hey, if we took Pokemon into an open world formula, would it work? Would people like it? And would it sell? And would it actually amount to a fun game? Yes, it did. However, what ended up becoming apparent was that this literally was just kind of a game demo or test, because as you play through the game, you go to various different world regions, of which there's 5 major ones. And as you get to about the 3rd world, you start to realize, man, this feels like exactly the same game again and again and again. There's little to no innovation. There's nothing really happening or changing in the environment. There's really nothing interesting going on. You just wander around the open world, catch a bunch of Pokemon. Every once in a while, there's a story element. Wash, rinse, repeat. And it gets incredibly boring once you get to the 3rd of 5 worlds and you realize you've essentially seen everything there is to do in this game. They're just going to slightly change the seasons, change the Pokemon available, but there's really nothing else going for it. It almost feels like they had the idea, but they didn't follow through to make it a full game. They just wanted to test the idea, but then sell it as a game. For me, I didn't dislike Arceus, but man, I was getting bored with it in those last, 10, 20 hours of the playthrough to the point where I just kind of wanted it to be over. With a lot of Pokemon games, I'll actively go out and try to do the side content. I'll try to do extra missions, fill the Pokedex. With Arceus, I had no desire to do any of that. As soon as the game was done, I was effectively done. The story's done. Please, let's move on and do something else. As you can also see, running on the Nintendo Switch, the game definitely had shortcomings. I feel like, Game Freak sadly isn't really putting out the best quality visuals in their games, which of course is going to be something we're going to bring up later on in this countdown as well, with a more recent Pokemon release. But I digress. Arceus is not a bad game. It's sadly just a game that feels like an idea or a test and not a full game. When it gets boring halfway through and you've actually seen everything there is to see when you're only halfway through, that's bad. And I feel like the game could have been a lot better if they put more time into it, or even better, don't release it. Take this idea and make a full-fledged game out of it. Wait, they did. All right. Anyway, Arceus is number 13 on my countdown of most disappointing games of 2022. I misclicked. Moving on. By the way, I saw some people strongly disagreeing with me about that in the chat here. Someone even saying that they feel that Arceus is better than Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. I strongly disagree there. I think Scarlet and Violet basically took the open world idea from Arceus and turned it into a full-fledged Pokemon game. That's my take, okay? All right, continuing on. The next game that I found disappointing, all right, is very low on this countdown as number 12. And the reason is basically because, honestly, it's not really a full-fledged game, but it was something that I actually found very disappointing. It's kind of a nitpick, but it's enough of a nitpick that I actually ended up overall not really enjoying it. So, ladies and gentlemen, my next entry in the most disappointing games of 2022 countdown is the Shadows of Rose DLC expansion for Resident Evil Village. Now, let me be clear. This DLC is good. It's not a bad DLC. And I said there's going to be many things in this countdown that aren't terrible. They were just disappointing to me. Okay? So why is this in the countdown? All right? Well, the gameplay elements are very similar to Resident Evil Village. The graphics are identical to Resident Evil Village. The locations are rehashes from Resident Evil Village. I mean, I could go on. Obviously, if you like Resident Evil Village, you're probably going to like this DLC. So then why am I saying that it's one of the most disappointing things of the year? I'll tell you why. Because once you get to the end, minor spoiler alert, because I promise you I will not spoil the story of the DLC if you want to check it out for yourself at a later date. This DLC ends up being timed between the end of Resident Evil Village and the final cutscene. So, to clarify, if you beat Resident Evil Village, at the very tail end of the game, there is a cutscene that's a time-lapse cutscene, okay? It reveals, essentially, where the franchise is going, and there's a big plot reveal of an ongoing question that you had during the course of the game, okay? That's all well and good. Then this DLC releases, and you're led to believe, oh, this is like an epilogue DLC to Village, so it's important. You want to find out what happened to this critical character from Resident Evil Village. I got to play the DLC. Then you play the DLC, and at the end of it, you realize it was all a bait and switch. This DLC took place before the actual ending cutscene of mainstream Resident Evil Village, meaning it adds absolutely nothing at all to the plot. You can skip this DLC, and you literally miss absolutely nothing. And that's a shame. Truth is, if people knew that, I think a lot of people might have skipped it and not bought it. If you knew actually where it took place in the plot line, you might have been like, well, why play it? We already saw what happens after it, so who cares? But I think Capcom wanted to sell the DLC and thought, oh, if we tell the truth about that, and we're not, they had to be deceptive. And I don't like that. I don't like being tricked. I thought this was going to be a follow-up epilogue story to Resident Evil Village, and it's just not. And the fact that they do reuse a lot of the same locations, the same enemies, and the same gameplay elements as Resident Evil Village essentially means they didn't really put much effort into it at all. They wanted to milk a little bit more money out of the customer without a lot of effort, and that's exactly what they did in this DLC expansion, not even really adding any new story element, which really sucks. So, a DLC that, again, doesn't play poorly, doesn't look bad, but sadly, it ends up being something that kind of is just superfluous and not necessary, and it really felt like a trick. I thought we were getting something that was going to add, and instead it was just like addendum side content, right? If you're reading The Lord of the Rings, and you already know the plot of The Lord of the Rings, do you need to go read all the side content in the Silmarillion or whatever that side books are? That's nice if you want additional content, but I'm pretty sure that, J.R. or Mr. Tolkien wasn't saying, hey, you need to read the side content to understand the main story, because you don't. And that's what it feels like. This is just supplementary side content. If you want to spend money on it, great, but then tell everyone that's what it is. Don't act like it's an epilogue DLC when it's very much not. So, it's filler, it's not interesting in my opinion, and that's why it was disappointing. Okay. Up next. This is one that admittedly, excuse me, I get the feeling, by the way, did I get that right? It's the Silmarillion or whatever? Is it the Silmarillion? I haven't said that word in a million years, so I don't even remember how to pronounce it or how to spell it. Anyway, the next entry in the countdown is a game that admittedly many of you probably will not even remember came out in 2022. All right. It's a game that probably a lot of you won't even understand why I have it in this countdown. All right? You basically have to have a certain kind of knowledge and mindset to understand what I'm about to say. If you don't, if it goes over your head, that's perfectly fine. It's actually the only game in the countdown that's like this, so don't worry. Ladies and gentlemen, number 11 in my most disappointing games of 2022 countdown is the King of Fighters 15. All right? Why did I think this was one of the most disappointing games of the year? First of all, it was one of the very few mainstream fighters to release in 2022. There wasn't a lot of fighting game releases in the year. Yes, there were DLCs and expansions, but just nothing too major in the realm of fighting games. I think everyone was anticipating Tekken 8 and Street Fighter 6, so everyone kind of played it safe, okay? King of Fighters 15 was the latest entry in a very long-running fighting game franchise. This game came out in the 1990s along the likes of iterations of Street Fighter 3, Street Fighter Alpha, you know, the emerging Mortal Kombat Tekken series and things like that. And as you can see, the game doesn't look half bad. The graphics are quite good. The fighting game mechanics are quite sound. And it's not a bad game. However, basically after having played it for about a week, and then finally going online and playing against people who kind of have figured out the meta of the game, that's really where things got very disappointing for me. So allow me to explain what I mean when I say the meta of the game. In any kind of a competitive game, you got people who mess around and are just trying to learn the basics, maybe a few special moves, combos, and the like, and it's no big deal. But then you got people who are actually trying to find the competitive nature of the game. When this game is played at a high level, when it's going to be played in tournaments, exactly how is it going to play? And King of Fighters 15, sadly, continuing on with this line of kind of gameplay, has a meta that for someone who is not someone who basically likes a game where it's like a one-hit win, it's very disappointing. So allow me to explain what I mean by that. At face value, the game seems to have a lot of competitive gameplay elements. It's got rolling and counter hits. It's got combos, cancels. It's a 3v3 engine where it's teams fighting against each other, which is pretty neat. All right? But when it comes down to competitive play, this game literally becomes one gameplay strategy. There is a move called a little hop, and what it is when you jump, you tap down after jumping, and instead of doing a full-fledged jump across the screen, you now do a shorter version of said jump. Literally what you're supposed to do at high level is pick a certain couple of characters who have a really powerful little hop, try to get in a little hop hit. That little hop will lead to a combo. That combo then cancels into a super move. That super move can be canceled out of into another super move. And basically what ends up happening is this game has moves and combos that are completely unscaled. So think about this. You're playing the game, you're doing all right. All of a sudden someone hits you once, and that hit leads to you losing 60 to 80% of your health bar because of one hit. Good luck coming back from that. You're now at such a disadvantage. How on earth would you ever come back from that hit? And I've played fighting games competitively since the dawn of Street Fighter 2. All right? Some people like games where there's giant risk reward. Some people do not. In this game, with these characters who are repeatedly doing the little hops into combo, there's almost no risk. There's incredibly high reward. So what ends up happening is high-level gameplay is just a bunch of little people going hop, 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 hit, hop, hit, hop, hit, hop, hit, and then combo, combo, combo. And that's it. That's literally the whole game. That's not good. For a competitive game, you want variety of gameplay. You want people playing it differently. Maybe one character plays keep away with projectiles and you know, and like Dalsim, stretchy limbs, keep you back. Then another character is a strong grappler who wants to get in and do combos into throws and does high damage. Literally, this game is get one little hit, one little hit, one little hit, combo, you win the whole match. That's not good. I compare this to Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 a decade ago. A game where, again, literally you get one hit, you just keep canceling into your next character, canceling into the next character, blow them out, you've won the whole match. Or, on the flip side of that, activate X Factor. Now you're doing so much damage, you get one hit, you've won the match. And I don't like that about fighting games. I don't feel that's competitive. I feel that's stupid, and it's meant for flash factor. Because let's face it, when there's a crowd watching a fighting game, and someone gets one hit, and it leads to you going, boom, on their health bar. Oh my God, oh, everyone's freaking out, right? But that's not necessarily fun. competitive or even good from any kind of a quality standpoint. It's just flashy. And I sadly hate to say it, but I think that King of Fighters 15 went for style over substance. And when it comes down to the competitive nature of the game, it's just not very competitive. There's a few characters in this game with that little hop into combo that dominate the rest of the cast. So I'm not even exaggerating, within 1 week of this game being out, playing online was a nightmare because all anyone was doing was picking some of the overpowered characters and doing those stupid combos over and over to the point where it's like, why do I even want to play it? I bought this game at full retail price and I never really got my money's worth or time's worth out of it simply because the game's engine isn't very good. So it's disappointing. I was hoping for a reinvigoration in the King of Fighters franchise. Guess what happened? After this game being out for about a month, it was as if it never existed. Once again, King of Fighters faded into obscurity. No one really talked about it. Yes, in competitive circles, you'll hear it mentioned, and they hold it as like side tournaments and the like, but it never really hit a major stride in competitive circles. It's not like it has its own tournament circuit or league. It just is another side game amongst many other competitive games. That's sad. I was actually hoping King of Fighters 15 might bring the franchise into mainstream prominence. It certainly did not do that, and instead, it just kind of fizzled out and became very disappointing in 2022. Alrighty then. Continuing on, we're now hitting my top 10 most disappointing games of the year. Fens says, do you think like non-Tekken and Street Fighter fighting games basically have become niche? You know? Yeah. If you take a look at fighting games in general, you got Street Fighter, you got whatever NetherRealm is working on, whether that would be Mortal Kombat or Injustice. You've got Tekken, and then you've got kind of everything else, right? When you really think about it. Are there other games that are worth playing? Absolutely. The Guilty Gear franchise is great. Dragon Ball FighterZ was a standalone example of a game that was really fun. But at the same time, it really ends up being, what's Capcom doing? What's NetherRealm doing? What's Bandai Namco doing, right? And everything else kind of gets a little brushed under the rug. I really wish that wasn't the case. It would be great because more competition, the better. Well, that's correct. Literally says, what about Smash? Absolutely, Smash Brothers is a competitive fighting game that gets a lot of play and has a humongous community. At the same time, I would argue Smash Brothers is a little bit different. Is it competitive? Is it a fighting game? Yes, but it kind of has its own standalone community. You know what I mean? It's a little different. There's very little crossover, I feel, between that community and the other mainstream fighting game communities. Okay. Let's see here. So, nothing. I got basically a troll tried to distract me, and I'm going to ignore them. All right. So, continuing on, we're now going to head into the top 10 most disappointing games of 2022. Now, here's the deal. This next one, all right, I want you guys to understand something. Number 10 is not a game that I don't like. Number 10 is not a game that I even feel is a bad game. But number 10 is a game that overall was disappointing for me and my content for an interesting reason. Let's just get to it rather than dilly-dally, because I really feel like this is probably the most unique one in the countdown for me. Ladies and gentlemen, number 10 in my disappointing games countdown is Splatoon 3. Is Splatoon 3 a bad game? Hell no. Splatoon 3 is a great game. It's fun. It's competitive. It's got a great variety of weapons. It's got colorful graphics. It's got interesting content and gameplay. All right? So why in the holy hell is Splatoon 3 on my most disappointing games countdown? Let's be honest. Splatoon 3 is the most popular game in Japan for 2022. It was the highest selling, fastest selling game ever in the country of Japan. So, do I disagree with the Japanese? Actually, I don't. I do think it's a great game. Okay? Why on earth is Splatoon 3 in my most disappointing games countdown? It's a very simple answer. Because I was playing it. I played maybe 2 streams of it. And you guys, the viewers, got bored of it. You told me that this is a game that's basically more fun to play than watch. And after having watched me play it maybe 2-3 sessions, you guys got so bored with it, you told me to drop it. And the thing is, I had plans to play the single player. I had plans to play the multiplayer for a while. We hadn't even unlocked nearly half the content of the game when you guys got bored with it. And that's disappointing. That's a different kind of disappointment. I'm not disappointed with the game devs. I'm not disappointed with any of the game's performance at all. As you can see, it ran well, it played well. The problem is just for some reason, this game doesn't resonate with the viewing audience. You guys had absolutely no desire to see me play this for more than just a couple streams. And that's disappointing for a game that worldwide is getting so much love and attention. The most popular game ever in Japan. But when I play it for my audience, people didn't really care. Now, there's many different factors that I feel could be involved in this. Let's be very honest about this, shall we? This game is literally an update to Splatoon 1 and 2. All right? Can we be very honest about it? It is. It's literally just an update. Did they actually revolutionize anything? No. Did they dramatically change up anything? No. It really feels like you're playing Splatoon 1 and 2 expansion pack. All right? Now, you know what they say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And that's okay. I understand that. But at the same time, I'm trying to entertain an audience. I'm playing a brand new game I paid full retail price for, okay? And when you're trying to do that, people are looking for something new and fresh and interesting. Splatoon 3 is very much more of the same. Maybe if they did actually implement a ton of changes, the game would have been more popular among my audience. I don't know. But for me, I liked it, I was enjoying it, and everyone told me stop. So I did. And you know what? Ultimately, that's a disappointment. Because if it's a game that I'm having a good time with, and I want to keep playing, I wish that I could, but that is kind of the double-edged sword of being a content creator and having it be your job. This is not my hobby, this is my living. I have to do things on stream that are going to entertain an audience and are going to bring people to the streams and are going to allow them to support me as a content creator. People were outright telling me we want other things than Splatoon 3, and I was like, wow, that's sad. It's a disappointment for a whole other reason. The game's not bad, but maybe it just didn't do enough to innovate, to actually inspire my audience to want to see any more of it. And can I blame them? I guess not. So, good game, fun gameplay. I was enjoying myself. It just didn't resonate with my streams, and because of that, it ended up being disappointing for me. Okay? Okay. Continuing on. Now, this one, I honestly feel a lot of people will not be shocked at. All right? But before we get to it, I just received a $20 tip from 1 Minute Man. Thank you very much, 1 Minute Man, for your regular and ongoing support of my streams. I really appreciate that. Let's actually play the animation for him. And I do believe... Nope, that was a tie. It was a tie for top contribution. So actually, we add that to the running total, but we have not... He has not become the top contributor of the stream. That remains on Thomas from earlier. We're now at $79 out of our $100 goal. If you guys want to see a silly hat for the rest of the countdown, and we hit $100, you'll be able to vote on what hat I wear. Okay? Cool. Thank you, 1 Minute Man. Okay, so continuing on, as I was saying, number 9 in the most disappointing games countdown is likely not a game that any of you will be shocked to see in this countdown. I think for a lot of people, this game was intriguing. It was a wait-and-see kind of an interesting, atmosphere. What's it going to be? Will it be good? And when it came out, it was basically different schools of thought, different opinions that were thrown around. Honestly, I was of a group of people who didn't dislike the game. I think a lot of people actually did. I actually liked the game a lot more than others. However, I would be remiss if I didn't call it out for what it was. Ladies and gentlemen, number 9 on my most disappointing games countdown of 2022 is Ghostwire Tokyo, the latest game entry from storied and well-renowned game developer Shinji Mikami. This is the same guy who worked on classic Resident Evil games and the same guy who did the Evil Within series. And so, hearing that Ghostwire Tokyo would be his next outing, and that this game was basically supposed to be what Evil Within 3 was supposed to be, it was intriguing. All right? But over the years, we actually heard a lot about the game and realized this is definitely not Evil Within 3. It's open world roaming in a first-person perspective going through Tokyo. Tokyo has had all of the people essentially raptured away, and instead it's left a bunch of demons, ghosts, behind. What do? Well, you roam around, you explore. There's a lot of puzzles, there's a lot of platforming, there's a lot of enemies to fight, and there's actually a lot of interesting side content. There's also a lot of collectathon style things, as you can see literally right here, as I'm collecting the open world souls that are just kind of floating around. Now, the game starts out quite interesting. The plot is unique. It's riveting. It's kind of like a thriller plot, supernatural thriller. As you progress through the game, you unlock more and more abilities. And it's cool because you have different elements. You have a fire element, a water element, a wind element, and they're all really neat. And every time you get one, you basically gain kind of new traversal techniques as well as other combat techniques. They power up and level up throughout the game. So in that regard, it's good. If you like games such as Dishonored, where you like going in an open world setting, exploring, looting, fighting, trying to find unique ways to take on challenges and surviving, and of course this game having a supernatural aspect to it, kind of added even more, I feel. So where did Ghostwire Tokyo go wrong? Well, I feel like there was a few interesting missteps in this game. The first being that the enemies in the game are basically incredibly repetitive, all right? When you start off playing the game, actually the enemies are not repetitive, and it's quite interesting. But once you get about halfway through the game, you're going to end up fighting the same guy with an umbrella, schoolgirl, police-style character, and every once in a while you'll have kind of a mini-boss character. But for the most part, there's not that big of a variety of enemies until the very end when maybe there's like one or two left that they add on. But for the most part, there's just not enough variety in the combat. In addition, again, once you've gotten about halfway through the game, you've unlocked all of the abilities in the game. You have all the combat abilities, you have the traversal abilities, and basically now you're like, well, what's next? There's more coming, right? No. Essentially, you're just leveling up what you already have, but nothing really new happens, and you've seen all the combat, all the traversal, and everything that there is in the game. Now, I'm not saying that there's not interesting plot elements or developments. There absolutely are. There's actually some parts at the end of the game that change the map and make some unique locations to explore. But for a game that when you get halfway through, you've basically seen the entirety of the game, and now what incentive do you have to really continue on with side content if you're never going to improve anything else, right? And I found myself doing some of the side missions were kind of interesting. They have unique side stories and characters, but they don't really amount to anything. It's not like you feel greatly rewarded for doing any of the side content in the game. It feels like it's put in there in order to say, oh, my game has more content. But the game director, probably Mr. Mikami, never figured out how to make it mesh with the rest of the game and make it feel like it was meaningful. Instead, you have one major plot line going and a bunch of little side stories that mesh here and there. There is one exception to that, one side plot line that actually does dramatically add into the main plot of the game. The thing is, you don't know which one it is. So you end up doing side content that goes nowhere, and then you might actually say, man, I did so much side content, I just don't want to do anymore. And then you miss out on the one major plot line that would have added to the story of the game. Now, in addition, let's be honest, the graphics of this game are nice. But outside of that, it's not very scary. And from Shinji Mikami, the guy who's kind of the master of horror, you maybe expected more. I don't think I was very scared by this game besides maybe 2 or 3 times when I was facing down a ridiculous amount of enemies at once, or a new mini boss that was kind of creepy. But once you've fought that type of mini boss 10 times, it's not scary anymore. It's just more of the same over and over. So, sadly, I feel this game was a big disappointment. I was looking for more. I was looking for a game that was going to have traction. Maybe it would become a franchise. You know, this is Shinji Mikami's new gig. And it comes out, and I'm playing it, and I'm really enjoying it for the first half. And then I kind of found the further I got into the game in the second half, it wasn't as good. My audience felt the same. They kind of got bored with it. And by the end of the game, it was kind of like, all right, I want to finish it because I've put so much time into it. But man, it really fell flat and just didn't live up to its potential, in my opinion. And sadly, again, from Shinji Mikami, someone who maybe you want to see more and more content from, this is a game that, like, I wish he does something new. I hope he actually doesn't make a Ghostwire 2. I hope that he actually does something completely different. So I guess we'll see. All right. But man, it was disappointing. Again, when you have the Mikami name attached to it, you're expecting more. And I really don't feel like it was just good enough to live up to that expectation. All right. Continuing on. Wow. We are at number 8 coming up. Hold on a second here. Because it looks like I have a couple more contributions that have come in. So hold on a second here. See here. First of all, I received a $21 tip from Fens. Fens says, give me your top contributor spot. So far, I'm enjoying the list, even though I don't agree with it all. And again, That's totally fine. I'm happy that people have different opinions out there. I'm glad that you're sharing them. If you're watching this on demand on YouTube and you'd like to share your own personal opinion and say what you agree or disagree with, please leave a comment on the video and share your thoughts. Let's get some discourse going, okay? Thank you to Fens for the top tip of the day. And with that tip, we have actually hit our $100 tips goal, which means you guys get to vote on a hat for me to wear for the rest of the stream. So, let's try to figure out some hats that won't be so intrusive, shall we? Let's do a quick poll in the stream chat here. So let's do, which hat is Countdown best? We'll do the Los Santos cap. We'll do the Punisher beanie. We'll do the cowboy hat. And I'm trying to think what's not intrusive, you know, that it's not going to really bother me. It's probably the 3. We'll go with those 3. Los Santos. Oh, the beret. The beret isn't intrusive. There we go. All right. Now, Fens, thank you very much, and I hope that you enjoyed your time at the top of the leaderboard, because it's already gone. Because, ladies and gentlemen, someone also tipped $25. This is Haseo X5. $25 tips. I can't watch your disappointing countdown, best countdown, because I'm at work, but I'll watch them later as they go live on YouTube. Thank you. Wow, Haseo is not even here and is tipping to support the stream and has become the top tipper of the day. Thank you, Haseo, for that. Let's get them up on the leaderboard. Where's the H? Okay. And so now we're at 125. We are very close to hitting our vest goal for the day. Thank you all very much for the support. I appreciate that. That means if we hit $150 in tips, I actually have a pull for a silly vest that I'll wear for the rest of the stream as well. Okay, so continuing on. My number 8 most disappointing game of the year is likely something that absolutely, positively, no one will be shocked at. But man, it's for a silly reason. All right, ready? The number 8 most disappointing game of the year is Overwatch 2. And ladies and gentlemen, allow me to show you a representative video of the gameplay of Overwatch 2 that I experienced this year. I wish that I was joking. No, this literally is how I experienced the game. For the most part, every time that I tried to play Overwatch 2 from its launch, I just sat at a screen where I sat in a queue and couldn't play the game. This was actually one of the worst game launches in history that I've ever experienced. I would argue the only worse game launch than Overwatch 2 that I ever saw was Street Fighter V. Because Street Fighter V, you literally could not play for almost a week after its initial release. Overwatch 2 is a joke. First of all, Overwatch 2 isn't even a new game. It's literally Overwatch 1 with a facelift and a couple new characters added. However, the way that they launched the game was such a joke, most people couldn't even use the new characters at launch because they had a system where it would have to load in your previous progress from Overwatch 1, and that system wasn't working for many days. So imagine downloading the game, booting it up, you can't even play because you're sitting in a queue that keeps erroring out and you can never even see the gameplay. You sit there for hours and you finally give up. Then, a day later, you try again and it's exactly the same. Eventually, 3-4 days down the line, you boot up Overwatch 2 again to play it. You're actually getting into the match, but most of the characters are locked, saying you never played the original game, even though you did, and you should have access to the entire cast. This game was a humongous botch job. And then on top of that, if you even got into the game, you'd start to realize this is literally Overwatch 1. All they did was tweak it a little bit, rebalance it a little bit. It's the same exact game. This is not a sequel. This is not truly a new game. Thank God it was free to play. Because could you imagine if they charged people $60 to play the same game and have to sit around waiting to play it because their online system to get in was so bad? It was an insanely huge mistake. They effed up to the 10th degree. I don't know how they could have possibly done this any worse. And the funny part about this is, this game was getting hype. this game, people were like, wow, it's the return for Overwatch. And it was such a bad launch that within 2 weeks of the game coming out, absolutely no one kept talking about it. Now, I'm sure there's people who play it. I'm sure there's people who were the fans of Overwatch 1 who were happy to see it come back to prominence. But you have to understand something. When Overwatch 1 came out in 2016, it was a cultural phenomenon. There was mainstream merch of Overwatch 1 at every retail store you went to. I personally own a sunshade for my car that's Overwatch 1 that we bought at Target. Okay? Ha ha ha! There we go. Login error. That's a typical example of your Overwatch 1 gameplay experience right there. The login error. I had to show you that. Overwatch 1 was greatly respected, and it was talked about in game circles as Game of the... It won Game of the Year at the Game Awards. Did anyone even mention Overwatch 2 when it came to anyone's considerations for awards this year? I think you see my point. This game was a fart in the wind. It might have well never existed because it's only appealing to the core audience that already was still playing Overwatch 1. It didn't make a ton of additional money. In fact, I'd be shocked if it made any additional money for Blizzard. And it ended up being a humongous failure compared to the insane viral success of the original game. I'm actually appalled that the game is so bad and that Blizzard has lost its way as a game developer. I was shocked at how good Overwatch 1 is, and I'm equally shocked at how terribly bad Overwatch 2 is. It looks like people have voted for the cowboy hat, which I guess we're going to do unless see if the poll is close. It's not close. Well, it's about 3% between the Los Santos cap and cowboy hat. I'll let you guys vote for one more entry, number 7. And then after number 7, then we'll put on the hat, okay? Ladies and gentlemen, number 7, most disappointing game of the year, is a game that was in development hell. A game that for many people, we didn't even know if it was ever going to come out with the amount of time that it was taking to be developed and actually be released. And then, as if it couldn't have possibly done things worse, it came out with the worst release timing I've ever seen. Ladies and gentlemen, the number 7 most disappointing game of 2022. Do you know what it is? Can you even tell? I'm just curious if anyone could even figure out what this game is, just from looking at the video footage. I want to see if anyone in the chat can tell me what game this is, because I bet tons of people can't. Swaggin's got it. It's Dying Light 2. I'm shocked someone got it that fast, okay? First of all, did anyone even remember this game came out in 2022? I actually had a hard time remembering that it did release. And then when I was going through all my playlists of games that I played in 2022, I was like, oh shit, this did come out this year. I had totally forgotten about it, all right? What a sad and sordid story for this game. So first of all, Dying Light 1, when it came out many, many years ago, a first-person parkour game in survival horror of trying to not become a zombie, right, in this apocalyptic setting, actually was kind of unique. I don't think anyone had ever really done a first-person RPG style. I mean, we had first-person games like Left 4 Dead, but that was more run-and-gun style. This was completely different when basically you're trying to be like a character that levels up, gains abilities, and is trying to survive. However, infamously, my playthrough of Dying Light 1 was bugged. My game halfway through had an insane error where all my experience points were removed, and then they were put all into one skill tree. So I became incredibly weak, but I had all the parkour abilities in the game. I could zip line through the game like Spider-Man when I wasn't supposed to. In addition, I found a ridiculous amount of game bugs where I went to areas I wasn't supposed to be in and the game didn't render. So with Dying Light 2, which was announced only a year or two after, people were like, man, they're definitely going to do it right this time. They're going to take their time and they're going to put out a game with very few bugs and hopefully it'll live up to expectations. Well, they definitely took their time this time. This game had one of the longest development cycles I've ever heard of. And it came to the point where, like, people were questioning if it would ever even come out. Like, is this game still in development? Is anyone making it or talking about it or caring about it? I mean, I actually was interested in it when we saw it at E3, and then we saw it at E3, and then we saw it at E3, and then we stopped seeing it at E3, and then we heard nothing about it, all right? When it finally came out this year, first of all, let's be honest, the game didn't really do much to separate itself from the original game. it definitely feels like it's Dying Light 1.5 as opposed to Dying Light 2. Is the actual location different? Yes, it is. However, outside of that, it's pretty much open world parkour, avoiding zombies, running around doing fetch quests, fighting a bunch of enemies and clearing them out. It's pretty much almost identical to the kind of stuff you were doing in the first game, which leads you to ask the question, what were they doing so long developing this game? If they spent literally so much time developing it, where did the development time go exactly? I actually don't have an answer for that. I kind of scratched my head. I don't really know what they were working on, because I don't know if it was this game, or maybe they were, I don't know, going on vacation. Really, it feels like it's the same game. Now, in addition, this game came out, all right, get this, the same month as Horizon Forbidden West and 1 month from Elden Ring, all right? This game tried to basically beat all the other games to the punch and be the first one of the busy, early spring gaming season of 2022. And it worked. The game actually sold a lot because at that point there had actually not been many new games coming out, and therefore the game actually sold well, but then most people never really talked about it again after only playing it for about a few sessions. Me personally, I played it for about a week and a half, and everyone said, hey, we'd rather have you focus on all the other new games coming out. So I did. It took me about 15 hours of gameplay to actually get past the intro segment. Yes, allow me to repeat myself. It takes 15 hours of gameplay to get past the intro segment and finally get into the true meat of the game. And when you finally do, now you have this hang glider where you can use it to jump on vents and actually hang glide through the city. And now the game feels a little bit different than the original. But why did I have to waste 15 hours to get to it? This game does not respect your time whatsoever. It doesn't really innovate much from the original game. And even the graphics aren't that good. The whole game leaves you kind of scratching your head saying, damn, for the amount of time that this game was developed, I don't see it. In addition, because so many other new games were released immediately following this one, everyone forgot about it. I mean, my own audience forgot about it. I told you guys, hey, if you guys want me to continue to play the game, I absolutely will. Just let me know. Literally, no one asked for it. Maybe once or twice during 2022, people would bring up, hey, do you still have Dying Light 2? You going to play it? And I was like, no one really seems to care, so I guess I don't care either. And you know what? For a game that long in development, that anticipated to come out and be a game that basically no one cares about, that's sad. So it definitely is, for me, one of the most disappointing games. I was expecting way more. I was hoping they would have improved upon it and made it so much better than the last game, and instead it ended up basically being a forgotten game that most people can't even remember was ever released. That's pretty sad, man. All right. So, it is now official. The cowboy hat has won the poll for hat. So let's go ahead and get the cowboy hat for you guys. When we're getting into the top 6 now. Cool. All right. Now, in addition, more contributions have come in, ladies and gentlemen. So let's take a look here. It looks like Femboy Baxter did a super chat and said, 1 God of War, 2 Ring, 3 Sifu, 4 Poke, 5 Callisto, 6 Stray. I'm assuming either those are predictions or those are their own personal Game of the Year picks. I'm not sure. But thank you for the super chat. Is that too long? Hold on. I actually have another tip I have to shout out too, so I guess we have to see how long the person's name is in the next tip and then see if the leaderboard's too long or not. Okay, so I got a $26 tip from Guitar Player 1939. Guitar Player is now taking the spot of the top contributor of the stream. Thank you very much, Guitar Player. Let's get you up on the leaderboard here. Whoops. There we go. And it's a $26 tip. Which means, yes, it is official. We have actually hit the full tips goal for today, which means there will be a vest as well, which you guys will vote on momentarily. How big is this leaderboard now? Oh, it barely fits. All right. We'll keep it as is. Cool. All right. Fens, we're not doing Gunner glasses today. Normally, if we raise $50 in tips, I put on a pair of Gunner glasses. We're not. There's too much glare. And being that I'm doing this all day with the ring light, I didn't want to have massive glare in your guys' faces all day. So we kind of collectively agreed on the podcast today. We would forego the glasses so that way we wouldn't have the glare. Okay? But it's time for you to vote on a vest. What vest should we have options today? Let's see. Which vest is Countdown best? Let's do the gold. Let's do the denim. I'm trying to think what we'll go with the cowboy hat. Let's do the classic beige. And how about the McFly vest? Maybe too bright. Put yeehaw in the title. I don't think I'm doing that. Red? People want red. Okay. Gold, denim, beige, and red. There's your vest choices. Very nice. Thank you guys for the support. Really appreciate that. Thank you for supporting today's year-end countdown stream. Appreciate that. All right. Let's continue on, ladies and gentlemen. Number 6. This next game, in my most disappointing games of the year countdown, is kind of an anomaly. And what I mean by that is it's a unique situation. None of us actually even understood the situation at first because information came out much later that made more sense. It's a game from a company that typically their games, when they come out, are up to a certain quality standard and quite good. I'm not saying that this game wasn't of quality, but when I start to explain to you why this is a disappointing game, I think you're going to get it. All right? Ladies and gentlemen, my number 6 most disappointing game of the year, 2022, The Quarry. So, let's talk a little bit about Supermassive Games. Supermassive Games is a game company that made a name for themselves many years ago with a little game called Until Dawn, a choose-your-own-adventure game that used motion capture of real-life actors to create a unique survival horror situation. When you played Until Dawn, it felt like you were actually playing an interactive horror movie, okay? And since then, Supermassive has gone on to do a series of games that have actually been very successful. In fact, they're currently just finishing up their first season of the Dark Pictures Anthology, a game where every year they come out with a new iteration. It's a good horror game with an interesting plot. A lot of the times they reuse the same actors and actresses, but they're all shuffled around in different characters and roles. It's kind of like American Horror Story, but it's a game series, okay? I personally like the Dark Pictures Anthology. Although every year it's a little different, you don't really know what to expect, and you don't know exactly what they're going to be going for because every year's a different angle. There's been supernatural, there's been aliens, vampires, werewolves, all kinds of crazy stuff that Supermassive has explored in their game franchises, and I actually really enjoy the Dark Pictures. However, in 2022, a game came out of nowhere called The Quarry. This game is also from Supermassive Games, but to clarify, it is not a part of the Dark Pictures Anthology. So why on earth does the game even exist if that's what they were working on? The Quarry plays very similarly to their previous games. It's definitely a choose-your-own-adventure game. You're playing as various different characters, trying to keep them alive, making life-or-death choices and situations. You can actually change the way that they behave towards each other and their attitudes based on their dialogue choices and what they choose to do in the game. Will you risk your life to save your friend, or will you play it safe and run off for self-preservation? Will that person then live or die as a result of your decision? It's always one of the mainstream things that happens when it comes to the choices in these games from Supermassive, all right? But The Quarry saw some distinct differences, all right? First of all, again, it's not part of the Dark Pictures Anthology. So why the heck was The Quarry even made? It's kind of weird that this game kind of came out of nowhere and was released the way that it was. Number 2, The Quarry has arguably some of the worst writing I've ever seen in any medium. I'm talking film, I'm talking audio, like radio, I'm talking reading of comic books, regular books. The writing of the characters in this game makes it so that almost no characters in the game are likable. You've got the obnoxious jock who's a dunderheaded idiot and makes every dumb decision. You've got the incredibly self-centered ditzy girl who only cares about online blogging on TikTok, right? You've got every character fits into another obnoxiously stupid teen stereotype. And I get that what they're going for is trying to reference like horror movies of yesteryear. But the thing is, you need to at least like someone in the game to enjoy the game. And this game has literally, in my opinion, zero likable characters with zero redeeming qualities. Even some of the characters that they were trying to get you to like, you end up not liking. And to me, like, what's the point of keeping everyone alive if I hate them all? Just let them all die, right? So you end up losing any incentive to really try to do any kind of choices to keep any of them alive. And it's just kind of going through the numbers of, oh, maybe I keep them alive, maybe I don't. Who knows? Ultimately, the game's not terrible, meaning graphics are good, decent length. Yes, your choices can actively affect the plot, and it actually has some unique collectibles and elements that make it kind of cool. But it definitely feels like the oddball game in the series. I mean, for example, every other game I've ever played from Supermassive definitely has an air of silliness tied in with the horror. But multiple times in this game, the cast of characters literally dance and sing about a breakfast cereal in the middle of surviving a deadly series of murders in the middle of the woods. Because the first thing I think of when my friends are being dismembered before my very eyes is pop, pop, peanut butter, utter pops. I wish I made that up. That's actually part of the game. So if you don't think that the writing is cringe, if you don't believe me, all you got to do is watch someone play it for yourself. You will cringe along with it. You will not believe how bad the writing is in this game. So you might say, wait a minute, this is really weird. This game sticks out like a sore thumb. It's not part of the Dark Pictures anthology, which is what Supermassive is working on now. Why does it even exist? Well, guess what? It was actually revealed about a month or two after the Quarry released. This game was not supposed to be released on consoles. This game wasn't supposed to be released at all. This game was a game developed as an exclusive to the failed attempt at doing games without a console, Google Stadia. Yes, this was supposed to be Supermassive's attempt to make a game just for the Stadia and an attempt to sell the Google Stadia. So that's why it doesn't fit in with the formula of the Dark Pictures, and it kind of feels out of place. Makes sense now, but we didn't know that when we bought it in the summer of 2022. And so now when you put, oh, okay, that's why it feels different. Maybe that's why it didn't have as much effort or as good writing, because it was meant to just kind of be a game that you buy the Stadia and play. It's not, it's not seriously part of another series. But then again, why are they charging $70 for it? Right? If they knew that the game was meant to be inferior because it was a Stadia game, why did they charge full retail price for it? Maybe if they charged $30 for it, then you'd be like, all right, it ain't that good, but it's not a big deal. But the fact that they charged a full 60 to 70 bucks, depending on what platform you got it on, it's a kind of a ripoff for what you get. And I was very disappointed that basically a game that was supposed to be an experiment for cloud streaming ended up being a full-fledged release. That's a joke how bad it is. So if you like Supermassive games, check out the Dark Pictures anthology. By all means, go play Until Dawn. Avoid the Quarry like the plague. This game is one of the worst of this type I've ever played. I couldn't believe how cringeworthy and bad the characters were, and I seriously never want to ever re-experience it. I had to cringe just to pick a clip here that I wasn't going to vomit at rewatching during the countdown. All right, it sucks. I think I've emphasized that enough. Okay. Thank you guys for voting on a vest. Right now, Gold Vest is in the lead, but Denim is very close, so I'm going to let it go for another entry, and then after that, we'll tally it up. All right? So, this next one's going to be short and sweet. Ladies and gentlemen, my number 5 most disappointing game of the year, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. In a nutshell, why is Modern Warfare 2 disappointing to me? It's very simple. The online connections are inconsistent. For the upteenth year in a row, this game does not have consistently good online play. Every year I criticize it. Every year I say the same thing. The servers seem wanky. Sometimes you'll play a game and it's perfect. There's no issues whatsoever, and you can get kill streaks and all your bullets are registering, and in the next match you play, nothing wants to work. The kill cams are a joke. You watch someone where you aimed at them and fired, and on your end, it saw you unload an entire clip into them. Then you watch the kill cam, and on their end, it says, oh, they unloaded a clip into you first, and you never fired a bullet. This is an absolute positive joke. The game is a $1 billion game. There is no excuse that they keep putting out iterations of this game with the online play as bad as it is. They should have the absolute best online connections, the epitome of a great connection, considering the amount of money they make every year. They are the best-selling game every year, and they still put out the same subpar, inconsistent, wonky online experience. Why? Because they can get away with it. They shouldn't get away with it, but they do. It's sad that they do. Sorry, this game pisses me off to this day. Okay. Excuse me. All right. Continuing on. Felix the Maid that is Super Chat says Sonic Frontiers might be first. I'm not going to lie. I'm certainly not going to say anything because I don't want to spoil anything in the countdown. But thank you, Felix the Maid, for the Super Chat. Let's take a look at the poll. It actually looks like gold is going to win. Let's go ahead and get the vest because now we're into the top 4. I kind of want to go nonstop and not like end now. So we're going to keep going. Let me get the vest going here, and then we're just going to go boom, 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 and finish the most disappointing games countdown for you guys. Okay? All right. Golden vest it is. And it looks so darn good on me, especially with the new lighting. Look at that. Look at the sheen. You've never seen it in this amazing quality before. Look at that. I just look great, don't I? All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's continue on. The number 4 most disappointing game of the year for me is... Oh, where is it? Gotham Knights. Now, allow me to explain. I actually liked Gotham Knights a lot more than most other people. All right? I did. I actually think if you look at this game at face value, all right, it's a great game. It has a unique combination of heroes as the protagonists, and they all have their own little situations, side stories, and attitudes, personalities. They have interactions that are kind of cool and unique, and they all play a little differently. Each one of them, as you level them up over the course of the game, have different combat abilities. Some specialize in stealth, some specialize in the guns, some specialize in hand-to-hand combat, and it makes them all feel like they have their own unique identity. It's an open world with interesting content. Can it be repetitive? Yes, but if you play it intelligently, i.e., don't just play the same kind of mission nonstop, but instead do it in a variety order, the game is quite fun. The game actually features a ton of interesting villains from the Gotham universe or the Batman lore. It's also a unique what-if perspective. What if Batman did pass away and had to have Gotham protected by all of the proteges who he had trained over the years, right? Pretty interesting. So all those things are positives. So why on earth is this in my most disappointing games of the year countdown? Because literally all of that positivity is squandered by a graphical engine that isn't very good. Take a look at the game right now. You'll notice that there's some definition to the world, but not as much as maybe you would expect from a current gen game. The frame rate is at 30 frames or lower for most of the game, and frequently during combat chops up and ends up being very subpar. It's basically ridiculous for a modern game. There's absolutely no reason that a game that you're paying full price for should have subpar graphical performance like this. It seems like they had an interesting idea for what they wanted to do with the game, but they never could get the game engine to run the way that they wanted. And because of that, this game ended up being strongly panned and criticized by, professional journalists as well as gamers alike, saying, man, I like the game, but do I really want to pay $60, $70 for a game that very well could have looked like this on the PS4 or Xbox One? Why are we paying for the current gen version? By the way, the game has no last gen version. There's no PS4 and no Xbox One version, but it looks like a PS4 or Xbox One game. That's unacceptable. So the reason this is so far up on the list is very simple. The game literally is good, but ends up being ruined by its graphical ineptitude. If only they would have found a way to make it run and look better, this likely would have been one of the top games of the year. But because it runs like shit, that's all anyone could focus on, including me. Half the time I was playing it, I loved what I was doing, and I hated how it looked and performed, and that's a bad thing. If anything, this one needed a little bit more time in the oven, but I guess maybe the game developers just didn't have enough know-how to do it. Because, man, how could you release a game that looks like this in 2022 but charge full price? I have no idea, but that's basically why the games got panned. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're about to head into my top 3 most disappointing games of the year. Now, again, I want to clarify, just because these games have been in my list doesn't mean they're bad games or the worst games. They're the most disappointing games to me. What I would hope is that you guys will comment and let me know what you think, right? And please understand that these games coming up are not games that I'm going to crap all over just because they're in my top 3 most disappointing. Don't take it that way, because that's not what I'm trying to say, all right? Ladies and gentlemen, my top 3, or number 3, most disappointing game of 2022 is a game that I went into with high hopes, a game that looked really unique and interesting, a game with very cool art design. But the moment that the game tried to go above and beyond just being that, a unique piece of art, is when it failed. The game I'm speaking about, of course, is Scorn. This is a game that was a Game Pass game that probably a lot of people would not have played if it wasn't a Game Pass game. Just take a look for a moment at the graphics of the game. They're pretty creepy. Look at that thing you're holding. What the hell is that? Who even knows? Look at the environments. They're unique. Like people said, it's that Geiger style design. Kind of looks like Aliens or Prometheus. The plot is creepy as hell. And you're trying to actually figure out everything about what's actually happening in this environment with absolutely no real dialogue. Just kind of walking around and seeing things enslaved and ripping body parts apart and sticking them into holes. And it has this weird body horror style that is unique all of its own. And for the first 2 to 3 hours of this game, all right, it's actually quite good. It's hard, but it's actually quite good. There's really challenging puzzles that don't hold your hand, that you really have to mess around with and figure out for yourself. But the whole game emphasizes a feeling of isolation, desolation, and hopelessness. And then, about 3 hours in, the game starts giving you guns. And the moment you get the guns, that's the end of any enjoyment you could literally ever get out of the game. This game has some of the worst gunplay I have ever experienced in my entire life. And I'm talking the classic shitty FPSs, the knockoffs from the 90s that tried to spoof games like Doom and Duke Nukem. They play better than this game, all right? The guns in this game are a joke. The guns in this game basically don't do damage. They just annoy things. It's crazy how bad the gunplay of the game is implemented. And again, I feel like the reason is because they're trying to emphasize the desolation, the hopelessness. You are basically barely surviving or whatever. But the game becomes so annoying. The game becomes so tedious. The game becomes so over the top, torturous when you're walking around areas and enemies are coming at you and you can't really survive because you have no ammo, low ammo. The ammo you have, you shoot the enemy 5 times in the face and it barely does anything and flinches. Like, what were they thinking? I'm not exaggerating, if they had kept the gunplay out of the game, I actually feel like it would have been a much better game. But because they actually made the game about gunplay in the second half, it sucks. It's like the creative director had a unique artistic vision. That's great. They had a story that they actually wanted to portray through the game. That's nice. Give me that story. Give me puzzles. Give me narrative. But don't basically give in to all those conventions that since it's a first-person game, there must be guns. There must be some combat to speak of. And if you don't have it, people are going to say that the game's not good. I disagree. I think the game might have been kind of, if you made it like Myst, but only a disgusting body horror version of Myst, this game could have been really good. To make matters even worse, as you're about to see, there's actually certain fights in the game that aren't even fights. The fights are puzzles. You can't actually shoot the enemies. You have to just wait for a certain situation where you can actually either strike an enemy or shoot a grenade into its head or whatever. It's incredibly frustrating. All you want to do is enjoy the game, and instead, all the game wants to do is annoy the shit out of you the moment you have a gun in your hand. So, I really feel like, again, this was a game that absolutely, positively could have been a unique Game of the Year contender if it didn't give in to just, hey, we got to have guns because every first-person game has guns. It actually would have been a much better game overall if it didn't have the guns. And that's sad. So, I just honestly didn't like it only because of that. The whole first half, I'm excited. I'm having fun. This is great. And then the second half, it's like, what the hell am I playing? Why is it like this? Why are they torturing me so much? And why the hell am I even continuing on? Thank God it was a Game Pass game because, quite frankly, most people probably never would have even tried it if not. So it did get some exposure, but man, what a disappointment when, again, it started off so strongly and ended so goddamn poorly. Okay. All right, guys. The final two. Here we go. This one, I don't think anyone's going to expect. This one is going to shock all of you. But it was actually one of the biggest gripes I had in 2022. It's that much of a big issue for me. It's that much of a disappointment for me that I had to bring it up as the number 2 most disappointing game of the year. No one predicted this. Ladies and gentlemen, my number 2 most disappointing game of 2022. Cuphead, the Delicious Last Course DLC. No one saw that one coming, but allow me to justify my situation here and why I'm saying this. Cuphead released in 2016, I want to say. It was either 2016 or 2017. When it came out, it was absolutely great. It was a homage and a throwback to old school shoot 'em ups, combined with grueling difficulty and unique hand-drawn artwork. No one knew if it was going to be a hit. It ended up being one of the best games of the year. It sold tons. It ended up becoming a cultural phenomenon. You can now buy merchandise of Cuphead in stores. It's pretty crazy how successful the game was for what it was. I was shocked, but I was pleased because I absolutely positively loved the game. And so, by the end of that year, it was announced there was going to be a major DLC coming out called The Delicious Last Course. It would have additional bosses, additional gameplay elements, more story, and a lot more fun. Great. When's it coming out? Soon. Okay, good. And so, a year passed, and a year passed, and a year passed, and another year passed, and another year passed, and we had quality updates. The game got ported to other consoles. The game had a TV anime cartoon series or whatever. But where the hell is the DLC? We were told 5 years ago there was going to be a DLC for this game. And you would think if they weren't going to do a DLC, maybe because they were making a full-fledged sequel. Nope, that wasn't the case. It wasn't they were making a sequel. They were still making the DLC. So what the holy hell is going on? All right? Finally, last year, it's announced the DLC is finally coming out. Ah, hallelujah. We finally get more Cuphead after a 5+ year wait. I can't wait for it to come out. This is going to be super exciting. And so, with bated breath, we all waited. Finally, the DLC came out. We all bought it. We booted it up. We played it for 2 hours. 5 years. We waited for 2 hours of new gameplay. 5 years to develop 2 hours of gameplay. Oops. 5 years to develop 2 hours of gameplay. Now, listen. They didn't charge a ton for it. All right? So it's not a pricing issue here. It's a quality issue here. When you make someone wait 5 years for something, you expect something great. All right? This is actually a problem. Let me see if I can fast forward to actual... Here we go. Because I know this is... Sadly, I didn't grab a boss. Here's a boss fight. This is a situation where when you make someone wait so long for something, you build an expectation. Okay? Did the game have new bosses? Yes. Were the bosses unique and fun? Yes. Was it worth a 5-year wait? Hell no. It was really disappointing that we waited 5 years as fans of this game just to get 2 hours of content. All right? This game, maybe again, much like Halo Infinite, perhaps Cuphead is a failure of its own success, where the studio just doesn't have the capabilities to do a lot. I'm not sure. But man, I really, really liked this DLC. I thought that the DLC was great and outstanding. I had a ton of fun with it. And then it ended in 2 hours. And I literally wanted to cry. I wanted to rip my hair out. I wanted to punch something. I waited that long just to only fight a few bosses. And it was all over? I was pretty darn upset. And I think that my level of upsettedness was justified with the wait, right? If this had come out within 1 to 2 years, okay. And then if there was a sequel in development, okay. But now we wait 5 years for this. Does that mean we wait another 5 years for the sequel? What if the sequel's 2 hours long? You know what I'm saying? Like, this actually legitimately upset me in a way that I didn't expect to be upset. I was upset because I wanted more. The delicious last course left my stomach empty and wanting more delicious gameplay that's not available. What am I supposed to do? So, ladies and gentlemen, this pisses me off. A great game that sadly I'm never going to really get more of. Will there be another Cuphead? I certainly hope so. But I want to be younger than 60 before I play it. And at this rate, it looks like that's the development cycle that they're taking. So I don't even know if I'll be able to play it before I get carpal tunnel. And that's disappointing. Okay. My chat has completely revolted against me. They've actually lit torches. And they said that they're on my way to my home right now with pitchforks to come and shove them up my ass. They all disagree with me on that one. That's perfectly fine. We can agree to disagree. That's the cool thing about the world, is that everyone has a different take and a different perspective. And if you disagree with me that that was disappointing, that's fine. Hey, leave a comment on the video. Let me know about it. Call me an idiot. Outright just insult me as horribly as you can. Of course, that comment will never make it on the video because YouTube's just going to block it anyway. But go ahead and vent. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we're not going to sugarcoat it. We're not going to delay it any further. The number one most disappointing game of 2022, I don't think many people will be shocked by this one. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Why is Pokemon Scarlet and Violet the most disappointing game of the year? Is it because the gameplay sucks? No. Is it because the story sucks? No. Is it because it doesn't innovate enough? No. Is it because it's too short and doesn't have enough content? No. The reason this is the most disappointing game of the year is very simple. It looks like shit. Why does this game look so shitty? It's the best modern Pokemon game I've ever played. It's got the best story and writing of any Pokemon game I've ever played. The gameplay elements of the duels and everything is great. It's got an insane amount of Pokemon to catch. It's got a unique and fun and creative open world. It's got 3 major plot lines between Team Star, the gyms, and also Titan Pokemon that you fight and catch. It's got cool epilogue content. It's got all this good stuff in it. But why does it run like shit? It's a Switch exclusive. It's not a cross-platform game. It's not like they had to go develop on PC and console and Switch, and because of that, they had to split their resources between the dev team. Okay, it's a Switch exclusive. The game is made exclusively for that console. Oh, by the way, there's tons of Switch exclusives that play great. So why in the holy hell does this one play like shit? All right, can we be honest here? Let's be very honest. It's because, sadly, Game Freak or the Pokemon Company or whoever, point the finger, whoever's really in charge there, is forcing this company to make too many games in 1 year. Within 1 year's time, we had a remake of a previous Pokemon game, then Pokemon Legends Arceus only 2 months later, and then Pokemon Scarlet and Violet 10 months later. That's way too short of a development time to be pumping out 3 different video games. So what you end up is a game that has no detail in the environment, almost no detail on the Pokemon, an insanely choppy frame rate, massive amounts of pop-in out of nowhere. I mean, that Pokemon was like 2 feet away from me before it showed up. Characters that when they're walking through the village are chopping up like robots, like a slideshow, like a flip book. It's like, this is a modern game. This is a fully priced modern game. This is not a $30 game. It's crazy to me that in 2022, they're releasing full price retail games like this, and essentially they are running so poorly. All right? And people think, the thing is, and let's be honest about it, why does Pokemon and the Pokemon Company and Game Freak get away with it? Because people don't stop buying these games. As bad as this game looks, and as panned as this game was by critics and gamers alike, are you aware this is the best-selling Pokemon game? Yeah. It sold faster, it sold more copies, it basically sold more than anything. So here's the deal. If this game continues to sell and being a giant cash cow for Nintendo and for Game Freak and all of that, what incentive do they have to improve it, right? Why would they ever want the game to look better if they can rush out 3 Pokemon games a year and all of them are selling well, even though they look inferior? There's literally no incentive to do better. And that is a major problem, I feel, with the gaming community as a whole and consumerism, is even though we agree this game is inferior to performance, we all still ran out and bought it. We all still played it. It's a bestseller. And now what's going to happen? Nothing. Will it improve? Will the next one be better? No. It will look the same. There is no incentive for this game developer to do better because we all rewarded them with a game that ran in a very subpar way. All right? Now, by the way, I just finished the story of this game yesterday. I loved it. I loved every moment of the game despite its graphical shortcomings. But I'm not someone who's going to sit here and I'm not going to sugarcoat the game. The game runs like shit. It shouldn't. And people shouldn't be paying $60 in 2022 for a game that looks like it should be on the GameCube. Okay? It's that bad. Like, wow. I can't believe that they thought this was passable. But what's going to happen now? Likely nothing. What will take is a few years of failure. Game Freak needs to experience what it's like to not have a bestseller on their hands and then realize they need to take more time for the game dev cycle in order to make better games. Now, again, who's really responsible? Is it Nintendo dictating that they put out a certain amount of games a year? Is it Game Freak themselves? Who knows who's really pulling the reins on this and causing this problem? But it needs to be addressed. We can't ignore the fact that this game doesn't look good and performs very poorly, even though it's a console exclusive. All right? So, even though I love Pokemon Legends, even though I love Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, I played Scarlet particularly, and it actually is one of my actual favorite games of 2022, I have to call it out and say it's definitely the most disappointing game for me simply because it looks so poor. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, that has been my most disappointing games of 2022 countdown. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you think that I had some intelligent thought, or do you think that there is nothing inside of this head but a large black hole vacuum sucking in everything in existence around it and destroying humanity as we know it? Let me know. Leave some comments on this video, and I would love to read them and share them with everyone at a future date. In addition, people here on the stream have definitely shared their opinions. Some seem to agree. Some definitely seem to disagree. That's what I like, the discourse around these year-end series. So thank you very much for that. We have one final contribution. A $5 tip from Fens again. He says, you made me tip just to demand an explanation. How did you skip Horizon Zero Dawn? It was the most vanilla, mediocre thing of the last 100 years. I love you. All right, you want to know the truth? Honestly, I don't think I disliked it as much as a lot of other people. I actually really like Horizon Forbidden West. Not Zero Dawn, by the way. It's Forbidden West that you're talking about. However, there's definitely reasons why I don't think it was as good as it could have been. They made some game design choices that were kind of stupid. But at the same time, if you just play through the main story of the game, I actually feel the game is quite good. It's really when you veer off that story path and you start doing other content that it kind of falls flat. But as you know, it wasn't in my most disappointing games countdown. Will it make an appearance in my Game of the Year awards? Will it be in there? Will I explain all that? We'll find out. But anyway, guys, that's a different video. Thank you all very much for watching the most disappointing games of 2022 countdown. And thank you for supporting. Until next year, peace out.